Good morning, Bitcoins, and welcome to Mad Bitcoins Live. We're talking Bitcoin scaling and unification with Jimmy Song. Jimmy, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
All right, and Jimmy, could you just give the audience a little bit of your background and your basic opinion on Bitcoin scaling?
Sure. I got into Bitcoin back in 2011, as a curiosity. I saw it and I thought, hey, this is a really good idea. I bought some back then. Like everybody else, I wish I bought more. And I got into actual development in 2013, starting with colored coins. Since then, I've contributed to BTCD as a core contributor. I did some elliptical curve optimizations there. I was the VP of engineering at Armory. That's the very secure wallet. Still contribute once in a while. And I am currently at Paxos as a principal architect. The company might be more familiar to you as ItBit. But as far as the scaling debate goes, my current opinion, and this has evolved over time, and we can talk about that a little bit, is that I think it's good as it is. I think it's very good as it is. I think second layer solutions are inevitable. I wrote that a lot in my articles. And everybody's seen those hats that say "Make Bitcoin Great Again." My opinion is Bitcoin is already great. We don't really need to change anything. It's all good. Let's just go with what we have, because that's probably what the community is. That's about the only thing that the community will agree on with consensus. So that's my current position.
Well, I certainly agree on that. I think Bitcoin is great. I think it's never been not great. And that's really great that you worked on Armory. A lot of people are big fans of that. It was a really cool project. Really like Armory. So. And we would go straight to this discussion of unity and things staying the same. But unfortunately, we have to go to breaking news that I was just delivered. Actually, a friend sent it to me this morning, but I've been very busy today, so I just kind of got to it now. The price of Bitcoin is $929, following a recent downtrend from around $970. It may or may not be based upon this article by Peter Todd on the emerging consensus regarding Bitcoin's block size limit. Insights from my visit to Coinbase and Bitpay. And basically, to summarize the article that I've skimmed a couple of times but haven't read that much, he says that Bitcoin growth has hit a wall. He's got a chart. Then he says that this wall is making fees more expensive and times longer. This is true. Then he says the wall is not external but internal, also true. Then he tries to describe that the miners are signaling for random larger blocks. So I assume he's using XT and Classic as his evidence. Then he says that the future will look like the past. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know how he drew that comparison. The future will look like the past. Barry Bonds will always hit 50 home runs a year. The future will look like the past. I'd like to take him gambling. He's talking about minimizing the risk of a blockchain split. And this is where it gets really technical, but it sounds like the miners are just going to accept larger blocks with or without the core team, and that they don't need software anymore. They've changed the number from 2 to 4, and they're ready to go. So if you're watching at home, give us a thumbs up and a share, because Jimmy is going to explain this all to us. Go ahead, Jimmy. What does the article say in addition to my basic summary?
Yeah, so the main thing that I think everybody that's read the article that's technical has pointed out is that there's this sense that if 51% of the miners are signaling for anything, what they can do is sort of forcefully orphan blocks that aren't mined by that majority. Okay, and this is something that I've given a lot of thought to, and it's come up on both sides, right? Like this certainly is something that Bitcoin Unlimited, that's presumably what he's talking about. But Segwit proponents have also proposed, you know what, we're not going to get to 95%. Why not at around 51%? Let's just exclude any blocks that are mined by anyone that's not signaling for Segwit. Well, the game theoretical sort of consequences of that are outlined in the article I wrote today. But basically, if you have only 51% and you're trying to forcefully orphan blocks from the minority, you're going to have a pretty bad time. right? Like, because you already start with you're already one block behind. And what you're going to have to do is to get one block ahead in order to force all the non-signalers to accept your chain. And at 51%, that's going to take an average of 100 blocks to get to. At 55%, it's something like 20 blocks. Even at 65%, it's like 6.7 blocks. It takes a really long time. And 6.7 blocks with about half the network hash power is about 2 hours. And you know, like 2 hours to confirm anything, that's a pretty risky proposition. In addition to that, if that's what's happening, what's everyone going to do? Well, you have all this reorg risk. 6 confirmations is no longer sufficient because you might get reorged out. So what you need to do is wait like 12 blocks, and that's like 4 hours instead of 2 hours. It's going to make Bitcoin horribly unusable. And that's assuming a nice number like 65%. If it's something closer to like 51%, you're going to wait 2 days, right? Like that's a ridiculous amount of time to wait for any transaction. You think it's hard to get your transactions in now? Try waiting 2 days. That's going to be insane, right? Like that's so like the only way that this is going to work is if you get something like 75%. At that point, it's more like 4 blocks. That's a reasonable amount of time. It's because it's like 3/4 of the network. It's not 40 minutes, but it's like 60 minutes, an hour. That's not terrible, and you may be able to do something like that. So at the very minimum, I think 75% is what you need to not completely ruin the network. And I go into a lot of things in my article about how there could be a permanent fork if the chains get long enough. Then like people like the miners on both sides are going to dig in their heels because they have more Coinbase transactions on that chain, and at some point somebody's going to just want to completely split, do a permanent fork, and say, you know what, let's just go our own ways. This wasn't the point at which we wanted to do the complete split, but might as well do it now, and that may very well happen. In which case, Bitcoin price is going to go down. Everyone loses. It's going to be like, full-blown hot war, and it'll be like a divorce, right? Like it's going to be a huge divorce that's going to have all sorts of collateral damage.
Well, it's too bad they didn't have enough room on the hat for "Make Bitcoin incredibly difficult to use." That would have been a great slogan. Because obviously, and this is coming out on a Friday afternoon, as everyone knows from their West Wing history, this is Take Out the Trash Day. So they're dumping trash on us with this seemingly terrible idea. And but let's explore this more. What if there are 2 chains? Because what I'm hearing a lot from people is they're saying, let them fail. Let there be 2 chains. Let the other one have a technical issue, them not have the good coders actually angering the good coders with what they're doing now. Like they may be even turning against them, looking for ways to screw them over. Like you have the smartest people in the world looking through your code trying to break it now. It's a horrible idea. This is a locker room material. You just don't do this. But what happens? What if we go forward and their chain fails? Is Bitcoin Core fine? Do they just sail on?
Well, so here's sort of the distinction that we need to make. It's possible to fail in 2 different ways, right? There are 2 failure modes here. You could have 2 chains that merge back with a big reorg, like we were describing, right? Like you have like 10 blocks and somebody has 11. You have to take the 11. In a fork that we're talking about, like with a hard fork or a soft fork, as we've been talking about, they always have that possibility of coming back to the same chain. What I call like sort of the tighter branch will always have the advantage because they won't accept the looser branch. This is another technical article I wrote earlier this week. But anyway, what happens then is that there's enormous incentive to keep your chain alive, and what you end up with is a permanent fork. And with a permanent fork, you end up with 2 coins for sure. And the reason why a permanent fork, there's a lot of pressure to become a permanent fork is because exchanges will not accept deposits. Merchants will not accept payments until there is a permanent fork, because there's always the risk that your coins will just be reorganized back and all those transactions that happen get double spent. So for an exchange, it makes zero sense to accept from a looser branch. This is something that Bitco made crystal clear in their statement about what happens in a hard fork. I think they called it like vanishing risk or something like that. It's possible your Bitcoins or entire chains vanish as a result of a chain reorganization. So there's enormous pressure for there to be a permanent fork. Now at that point, you're two different coins entirely, right? And there's going to be a big fight over which one is the real Bitcoin. And obviously, Roger owns Bitcoin.com. Core developers have like GitHub/Bitcoin. So, I mean, they're all, it's going to be kind of like like claimants to the throne or something like that. I think Game of Thrones where everybody dies, right? Like that's going to happen.
Well, we're separating our assets in the divorce. We're going to have to sell the house.
Yeah, basically, and there's going to be enormous collateral damage. Now, as far as who's going to survive, well, I think both chains survive. There, and for those that are saying, well, there are going to be all sorts of exploits found in BU. Well, there's a lot of altcoins that are actually much worse, and they still survive.
And let's now for a minute, let's put the technical things aside and let's just talk about the marketing nightmare. Let's talk about the usability nightmare. Let's talk about, I want to charge Bitcoin for a graphic design project. Oh, do you need Bitcoin 1 or Bitcoin 2? Oops, I already sent my Bitcoin 2 to your Bitcoin 1 address. What happens now? That times 1,000. Every email box everywhere, everything on the street. I want to talk to somebody about Bitcoin. Have you tried Bitcoin? Do you have a Bitcoin wallet installed? Is it Bitcoin 1 or Bitcoin 2? Everything that we do will be prefaced with that question 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. From a marketing perspective, just a nightmare, a disaster, complete loss of faith. Now, Bitcoin, the name, has something, means something, and we want to throw that all away. Because these people need faster blocks or bigger blocks. Is that what we should do?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And that's the thing. Like when you have to, and I hear this all the time about like the miners, the coders, the users. There's complete confusion there. But having been a wallet developer, think about the wallets, right? Like, how are you going to make sure that which one are you supporting? And do you make it compatible? Do you fork it now, right? Like, think about the exchanges, right? Whose are you going to accept? How are you going to accept them? Are the addresses going to look the same? There's going to be enormous confusion over all of this stuff. And there's going to be like sort of technical difficulties all over the place throughout the entire stack of the ecosystem, right? Like from everyone from merchants to users, anybody using Bitcoin, it's going to disrupt everything. It really is going to be like a divorce in that it affects literally everything that you do. And
this confusion goes down on both sides. The BU users are confused. The core users are confused. Miners, you're not going to just run away with the money. Everyone's going to be confused. The price is going to down. You're going to make less money. Less money.
Yep.
If that's what you care about, you're going to make less if you fork.
Yeah, I mean, you're not just gonna make less. You're going to demoralize people like me. I have my own reasons, but like if you have a fork, between these two groups, I'm gonna call the two coins Maxwell Coin and Vercoin, right? Like that's essentially what you're gonna end up with. And I know those two people, and I know they're the last people in the world that would want to be dictators. But that's kind of what you're going to end up with, right? Like a very autocratic, very dictatorial group, because if you disagree with one side, you're going to go to the other. And you're going to have like sort of like in the US politics, what you have with like the primary system, whoever's more extreme kind of wins in that scenario. And you're going to have like these two parties, and it's going to be a very autocratic coin. And honestly, I didn't get into Bitcoin to be in an autocratic coin. If I wanted to be in an autocratic coin, I'd be at Ethereum or something, right? Like they're an autocratic coin. They do whatever they think is best, and there are some advantage to that, honestly. But I believe that that's a significant risk to a cryptocurrency, because the whole thing is built on trustlessness, right? If you have to trust the dictator to enforce the rules for you, then that's a little too much like fiat for me, and I don't think there's enough of a value proposition in Bitcoin for me to invest in it.
This is factionalism. This is extremism, and it's going to hurt both sides. What you're saying about Veracoin and Maxwell Coin is true. Maxwell will be forever scarred by what happened here. He'll always think if we screw up, there's going to be another minor revolt. We're going to split again. We're going to fork again. The amount of extra scrutiny that they're going to do on everything they do is going to be heavy. And then the BU team should also be scarred, should also be worried. What if someone forks out from us, another minor revolt? We can't trust the other miners. All of the trust in this system would go out if we fork.
Yeah, and that's a great point. There's now a precedent set that if you disagree, you just fork, right? And you're not going to end up with 2 Bitcoins. You're going to end up with like 7, right, in 5 years, right? Like they're going to be always people that disagree, just like, you know, like in any primary, you have sort of an insurgent candidate or whatever, and they're gonna get some followers. They're gonna go to their own coin. They're gonna say that we're the real Bitcoin. It's not gonna be just like 2 Bitcoins, confusion with 2. Imagine like that's confusing enough. Imagine 7 Bitcoins and all of them saying we're the real Bitcoin, right? Like that's ridiculous. Like that, and that's an enormous risk, and that's a violation of trust for the market. And this is something that I pointed out in another article that I wrote, is that Bitcoin's main value proposition at this point in its history is as a store of value, right? Like it's as a store of value. It's not about medium of exchange. The transaction capacity doesn't really matter that much. Ask anybody that you know about why they bought Bitcoin. Maybe it's because at the beginning, hey, I used it to go buy drugs off of Silk Road or something, right? Or I wanted to advertise on Backpage. I don't know. But for the most part, it's people that are like, you know what, this looks like a really good investment. You know, there's only going to be 21 million ever, and you know, no one can take it from me. I'm my own bank. I get to secure it. It's not easily seizable. I could secure it very easily. You know, like I could even have a Brian wallet if I want. Don't do that, by the way, as a wallet developer. That's not a good idea. Anyway, but there are so many ways you can secure this thing, and it's a fantastic store of value, right? It's liquid and all this other stuff. Medium of exchange, which is what we're fighting about, right? Like this whole scaling debate is all about medium of exchange. That's like 1/10 as important as store of value. Store of value is the main reason. That's the main show, right? That's why you go and buy Bitcoin, not because you want, you want to, do some trading or something, or to buy something. Like even like I have a friend at Dell, right? Like he says, oh yeah, we now take Bitcoin. I'm like, how much volume do you get? Not that much, right? Like nobody, any place that takes Bitcoin, unless they're offering like a substantial discount like Purse or something like that, they don't get that much business, because credit cards honestly are superior, right? They confirm faster, you can charge back, you get points for it. There's a million reasons why you would. I mean, there are some great things about Bitcoin in terms of medium of exchange. You can send it to China without any fees, right? Like, or I mean, for whatever the fees are on the blockchain right now. And that is a good feature, but this is not the main reason why people are holding Bitcoin. It's because it's a good store of value. And that kills me that we're arguing about this tiny issue that's maybe 1/10 of the value of Bitcoin, and we're willing to destroy 9/10 of the value of Bitcoin by saying, you know what, we're going to destroy trust, we're going to split it, we're going to make it completely dictatorial, and we're going to do. If it comes close to that happening, I'm going to do like your guest last night, Vinny Lingham, and sell 90% of my Bitcoin. I think the risk is just too high that it turns into fiat.
And once the store of value trust is gone, it can't be easily repaired. People always ask why I'm on about the 21 million units. Well, I'm a student of history, and I've looked at the Federal Reserve, and I've seen what endless money printing does to a bill. It makes the value go down. The more bills you have, the less that bill is worth. Now, Bitcoin locked at 21 million units, I can try to believe that thing will have the same or perhaps greater value just by holding it. That's not true with the fiat system. It's not true with Ethereum. It wasn't true with Dogecoin. You have billions and billions of units. When you have an inflation bug that you don't even understand and you don't even care, these are economic issues. They're not really technical. Like 21 million is a number. It's a limit in some code somewhere. But when you put that down as an economic truth, it creates a store of value.
Yeah.
It's destroying that store of value. Will people come back? will they be like, I just lost all my money and now I'm going to come back and invest some more?
Probably not, because you've destroyed their trust, right? Like, and trust is such an important property of store of value. You buy real estate as a store of value because you trust that it will be still worth something to somebody later. You buy gold because you trust that somebody else will still value it when you're about to sell it. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's only 8 years old. Right? For a store of value, that's really, really young. And you could destroy trust in something this young very, very easily. And it's very fragile, and we have to treat it with kid gloves, because once you destroy it, it's like Humpty Dumpty. You're not going to put it back together again, you know? And it's like a divorce. You don't really get back together. I mean, I guess some do, but it's never really the same, is it? Right? Like, it's not a good situation. It's not a situation we want to find ourselves in. And we are headed in that direction right now. And I implore the community, let's remember the good times. Come on.
Exactly. Well, let's move into phase 2 of this conversation. Let's start talking about how we can turn this all around. Now, I was talking to Vinny Lingham last night, and people used to call Vinny the Bitcoin Oracle, but they might just start calling him the Bitcoin Gandhi, because we struck on an idea together of this idea of unified Bitcoin, that we need to unify Bitcoin. We're not going to call it a compromise. A compromise is everyone losing. Unification, we come together for a greater good. And that is our only hope at this point, is that we come together for a greater good, and that we forgive the other side, whoever they are, and we bring them in. And I wrote this tweet this morning, and people are liking it, and I like that. I said, we are more like our fellow Bitcoiners than anyone else. Why separate into 2 weaker groups when we can be one strong one? And even though they've released this paper today, and even though they might 51% attack our network, and even though they want to split off and have their own Bitcoin, we need these people. We need to bring them back. So how are we going to gain the strength to forgive these people, and how are they going to forgive the other side? How are we going to bring these people back together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I for all the people that are single in the audience versus those who are married, if you're married, you'll understand this analogy a little better. I'm married, I have a wife, and there's certain things that you don't talk about, right? Like, there's certain things that you don't bring up because you know that's pushing their buttons, unless you're doing it intentionally, in which case you're just being kind of an a-hole, right? Like, but you want to be, you want to sort of move past an issue. And this, believe me, is a minor issue. I have reason to believe that we will scale without Segwit or 2 megabyte blocks or 4 megabyte blocks or whatever it is that people want right now. We will be able to scale without that. And this is something that I believe the markets can do. If we just move past this issue, right? Like, let's just put it behind us. Let's not talk about it. Let's just delete all the code that's in there that's dedicated to this stuff, and just say, you know what, let's drop the issue. Let Segwit activation expire. Let's delete BU, bring everybody back in the fold. Let's move past this and work on stuff that we all care about, which is like store of value properties, you know, make it more secure. That would be an excellent signal to the market, right? Like, this would give cause for optimism to all your kids, right? Like, we're headed for divorce right now, right? Like, as a couple. If we keep on this path, then, you know, at some point someone's going to do something. And, you know, I don't know if it'll be like a 51%, you know, minor revolt or something like that, or a user activated soft fork or any of these things. But they're all sort of shots fired in a war. And it's entirely possible that, you know, we fork as a result of that. I am pleading with the community. Let's not do that. Let's just put it past us. Let's just not talk about that again, right? Like, because what Twitter and Reddit and all these social media platforms end up doing is it gives voice to the complainers, and you take like sort of the worst thing the other side has said in bad context, which if you're married, you know happens a lot in fights and stuff. Well, that gets amplified by like 1,000 using Twitter and Reddit. If we just move past that, sort of like, let's not troll each other. Let's just move past this issue. Let's go back to what Bitcoin is really good for, and that's store of value. Let other people handle the medium of exchange. Like, you could let another, you know, altcoin potentially even, like, handle that part of it. In many ways, people are starting to use Monero or whatever because it has certain other properties. But whatever, that's not the important part of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the major store of value, and that's why it has value in the first place. If it were a medium of exchange, that's not going to give it that much value. I mean, although it may a little bit. Let's move past the issue. Let's just forget about it. Like we need marriage counseling. We need marriage counseling. You need to help us with this, man.
Well, let's start down this path. Let's go back and let's remember the reasons that we got married in the first place.
Yeah.
All these people around us that are commenting on us now, we don't know their motivations. They're not a part of our marriage. They don't understand our love. Right?
Right.
Maybe they love Ethereum. Maybe they love Dash, like respect, but they're never going to be fair commenters on our Bitcoin love. And we need to get back to that. And we need to say, what about the banks? There's all these banks and insurance companies, this entrenched financial system. We used to talk about it all the time, how we were going to beat it and how we're going to stop it. That was our goal together. And they don't want us to win. They want us to split. The banks want us to split. Does that piss you off? Does that make you want to recommit to the marriage? Do you see how outside forces are destroying our marriage? Are you going to let them do that? That's are you going to let them destroy our marriage?
Yeah, I mean,
people at home.
Yeah, right. Like it's kind of like watching, other people flirt with your, spouse or something, right? It should make
you standing up for that. Not at a bar. This is not a singles bar. They got the ring on the finger. Come on.
Yeah, and you could kind of tell that there's like a jealousy and a spite that only like true lovers can have.
We'll be better off without them. Our chain is good enough. We don't need them.
Right. Thou protesteth too much or something. Like there's a little too much emotion in this to believe that they really don't care as much as they claim to, right? Like there's of course, like you don't get this much emotion in a debate unless you really care about it. And in that way, that's good. And maybe that's a good place to start, like in a good marriage counseling session. You guys obviously care about each other. You need each other. You need to talk through this, or you need to move past this, or you need to think about the good times. You need to have empathy for the other side, or whatever it is, whatever ends up working, we need to do more of. And that's something that I think as a community we can do. We can just push this past us. Like go with what we have. What we have is fine. It's worked great. Bitcoin got to almost $1,300, right? Like it was doing fine. We were doing better than ever. But like there's like this issue with like not picking up your laundry or something, and that's like causing this all this marital strife. That's not that important. The scaling debate is not that important compared to store of value and everything else. This is not an important issue. You can make it an important issue, like in America, just like blow up about it and then make it much like worse than it was before, which frankly both sides are doing. But like that's not the way to resolution. That's not the way to unification, which is I think what we want to get to.
Exactly. Let's leave the dirty clothes on the floor and focus on larger issues. This is not about the laundry today. We have to also, I'm going to ask more of you than I've ever asked, because I'm going to ask the truly Jesus thing. Everyone has to turn the other cheek. We all have to wade in this debate. We have to be ready for them to say the most horrible thing you can imagine. Like just today, they wrote a big Medium article with slides and gave presentations at Coinbase and BitPay, our in-laws and our mother and our father, and they told them all about our troubles. And we have to forgive that. Okay, that you said you were going to 51% attack us and take the network. We're okay with that. That's an example of how angry you are and how frustrated you are with the block size situation. And I accept and understand your frustration. And I want to help you improve with it. I don't want to split us up into two groups of hash power, two groups of Bitcoiners that agree on everything but one thing. We should stay together.
Yeah, and we're stronger together, honestly. And like, there's this sense that, maybe we're better apart, right? Like, which is what every couple says right before divorce. We're better apart. But every couple that I've known that has been married like longer than 20 years, they always say, you know what? There were like 2 or 3 years in there where I just wanted to kill the other person, but I'm so glad we stayed together. And it's better for everybody, right? Because like everyone that I know that has divorced like describes it like a bomb. you know, like where it destroys not just the two people that are involved in the divorce, but everyone else around them, not just your kids, but like, you know, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, you know, your cousins, whatever. It's a traumatic event. Like they had this one study a while ago. It's kind of an aside, right? Where they asked people to rank like the most traumatic experiences of your life, and they had a whole bunch of things on that list, including like losing a family member like to death, right, or cancer, or dismemberment, right, losing your arm or leg or something like that. You know what came up number one? Divorce. And this is from people that have had like multiple of these. They say divorce is clearly the worst. And it is because it's an emotional toil, right? Like it's not like a physical one where you can just say, okay, well, you know, that it is what it is. It's an emotional one that's not going away. And in the same way, if we split, this is not a pain that's going away. It's going to linger. I think Zuko had a funny tweet about like how you know, like I really hope that, you know, there's an amicable split and both chains find like really good customers, and they're so preoccupied with their customers that they don't think about attacking each other. Now I was like, you underestimate the spite that results from a split. And that's kind of what's going to happen. You think the Bitcoin's going to go down after splitting? No, it gets worse, right? Like any couple that divorces will tell you it got a lot worse when you got to court and like you start accusing each other of stuff. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
Let's think about the kids. The kids aren't just the Bitcoin users like you and me. The kids are the wallets. The kids are Coinbase. They're Purse. They're all these companies that require Bitcoin. And by the confusion of two Bitcoins. No matter that you think your chain's going to win or your processors are bigger or whatever, two Bitcoins destroys us all. Wake up tomorrow and tell me the price of Bitcoin is this. And then I ask you, which Bitcoin? Every single question is multiplied. It's a barrier to entry like you cannot imagine. And the media will declare us dead on both sides.
Yeah.
Whichever side wins, whichever side loses, we're both dead.
Yeah.
Bitcoin 1, Bitcoin 2.
Yeah, and you'll have lost the trust of a lot of people. And, you know, children growing up in divorce obviously have a lot of this, right? Like they have trust issues growing up, largely because they're the most stable thing in their life split up, right? And that's kind of what's going to happen, right? Like who's going to trust Bitcoin again, right? Mt. Gox was bad enough for the trust in the system. And that was that caused like a 2-year bear market. This is going to be trust on a scale that normal Bitcoiners that knew, hey, you know what, Mt. Gox was in trouble, you know, at least they knew what the heck was going on and they knew to sort of ignore that news a little bit. This is going to hit at the core of Bitcoiners that understand everything. Like I said, like if it splits into two forks like that, I am selling my coins. Even if it gets close, I am selling my coins because it can't end well. This is not going to end well. And maybe there's some divorces I admit that, you know, end up okay, right? Like there are people that end up okay, but vast majority of people that are divorced, they have a lot of damage. We're not any different, you know. This is going to be a very terrible thing, and you know, I know I'm probably losing people that are divorced or whatever, but hopefully hopefully you can forgive me. I'm going to ask for forgiveness, just like what you said. You know, please forgive me if I'm offending you, but you know, I'm just trying to figure out the reality of the situation, which is that, you know, there's going to be some serious damage and lingering damage and damage that lasts for a long time if we end up down this road.
And we have to understand it through our partner's eyes. We have to understand how bad it is for them that they would want to do this, that they would risk all this, that we'd have to sell the house. We'd have to split up the kids. We'd have to move to another city. No one wants to do all these things.
No.
Let's go back for some positive stuff. I called out for Photoshops this morning and things with captions on them. And you delivered. My friend Crypto Graffiti came up with Bitcoin. You son of a bitch. Unironic bicep close-up. Look how stronger we are together. Our arms will grow like that. It'll be fantastic. We also had a great one from EA Software. He sent us this. Unify. Bitcoin. And I think this is the kind of stuff we got. SpongeBob and Patrick, Core and Unlimited. Unify Bitcoin. I like this stuff. I want more of this. We stand together, united, unified as one. We can still do this. It's not over. Like, things are scary. Like, mean things are being said. medium articles and slideshows are being given, and maybe they're not that helpful. But we can get over this. We can forgive the other side, and we can unify Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully we start listening more to the concerns of the other side, because I really don't think it's about the scaling, right? Like everyone says it's about the scaling. Well, it's not about the scaling. It's more about control, right? Like, and this happens a lot, like in marriage counseling. It's not about the towels on the floor. It's more about, it's a deeper issue. And I think there's something that someone said, a quote I read a long time ago. Problems are usually not solved at the level it shows up. You usually have to go a level deeper before you really can get at it. And there are some deeper issues, right? Like there is sort of like a mining conglomerate in China, right? And most of the core developers are, English speaking. There is sort of a communication problem between those two, and a lot of they tried with the Hong Kong summit or whatever, and they tried to come to a resolution that obviously didn't go well, and things sort of blew up, and there's like accusations of betrayal on both sides and stuff like that. And that's the sort of thing that we have to be a little more careful about, and really listen for the concern behind the concern, right? Like this isn't about scaling as much as people make it out to be. It's a nice, easy thing to argue about, but the bigger issue, I think, is about control, specifically of the various factions of Bitcoin, because you have users, you have miners, you have you have developers, you have wallets, you have exchanges, and they all want people to do whatever they want, and they have concerns, right? And if we're creative and like sort of think from a permissionless market perspective, I think all these problems are solvable. Instead, we're trying to solve at this protocol layer, which is probably the worst layer that you can solve things in, because you need permission from everybody else to solve it. And instead, if we sort of let the market take it, then anyone with with a computer and some coding skills can make up whatever they want, right? Like they can come up with different permissionless things that can help the network. How let's bring all this talent that's in this industry to bear on these problems rather than fighting each other, because there's some fantastic people, right? Like I had this Civil War poster that Philippe made for me that about a year ago. I don't know if you've seen it. It says Bitcoin Civil War, and everyone's in sort of like different costumes or whatever. Yeah. So you'll pull it up, and I love that poster, because I think the message of that poster, at least for me, is everyone's a superhero in this in Bitcoin, right? Like we're doing superhuman things. This is stuff that no one in their right mind thought we could do, and yet we're fighting each other with it, right? Like there's all this power in this community, and we're fighting each other instead of doing good for the community, right? Like we like together we could do some amazing things. We could potentially like completely disrupt the entire world banking industry. Instead, we're fighting each other with all this stuff, and that is just incredibly sad to me. Incredibly sad, because there's so much good that's possible, and we're sort of wasting it.
I completely agree, and I'd like to go back to my overly simplified chart here, I'm being critical of, but I still think is important. What I want to say here is that no one end of this triangle controls Bitcoin. The coders don't control it, the users don't control it, and what we're going to find out—
my computer's restarting for a second, so
Oh no. Well, I'm going to keep talking while his computer restarts. It sounds like he's got Windows. I'm going to make fun of him when he gets back, because that's a very Windows thing to do. My computer's restarting. Okay. But what I was going to say is that no end of this triangle controls the whole thing. And what I'm afraid we're going to test is, do the miners control Bitcoin? And I mean controlling all of Bitcoin. I've only skimmed twice the article, and I've only basically understood the slides that Peter Rizzo has presented to us today. But from my basic understanding, they think if they get 51%, they can fork the network and take it over. and that there'll be no blowback, and that there won't be any future problems that they would need the incredibly talented core team to solve. I disagree with that on a lot of scales. I disagree that I think they're going to need the core team for those problems. I disagree that they can just smoothly take the network, take the chain. I disagree with a lot of that, and I think we're better off if we work together. We still don't have Jimmy back, but we have a box where he used to be. What else do I have to say here? Let's go down to the chat, see what you guys are talking about. See if you're running Windows. Let's see. Oh, where's Bitcoin John Lennon? Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Oh, good point, Spiritist. John Lennon was a powerful force for truth. Practically invented the peace movement with things like the bed-ins, where him and Yoko stayed in bed all day. And yeah, you can't get in any trouble. A lot of people, guy from Clerks said that about Hitler. You know, if he'd just done less, people would have been happier. I can see Jimmy's little head thing, but I can't see a camera or mic. Maybe Windows is still loading those important drivers. Let's scroll back out. Let's see. Is it possible to fork to BU without having two coins? It seems like it's a possible thing. Basically, not really. The Ethereum Classic is the closest thing we have as an example of what a fork would be like. And what kind of happened is the whole Ethereum team, the foundation, Vitalik, the coders, they were all like, you know, let's fix this DAO thing and get our money back, right? So they forked the chain, they created a new chain. The old chain was still there, and what happened is, hey, Jimmy, I'm explaining the Ethereum thing, but I'll get back to you in a sec. So then the old chain just kind of kept going, and people mined it, and then there were two chains. So in any hard fork situation where there are two chains, people could mine them, and in this situation, they're probably going to. The question was, is there any way to for BU to fork without having two coins?
Right. That there's no way. That's the whole. Well, there is a way, and it's if they merge back and all the miners upgrade. Right. If there's consensus, there's
so
never
we could
two
like temporarily fork 10, 20 blocks go by, and then they're like, oops, let's get back together, and we make up. Right.
Right. That's actually what happened a few years ago. I think it was like with Bitcoin 0.8, there was like a level DB bug, and there was like a 6-block fork, and they merged back. A lot of miners actually sort of sacrificed for the good of the community, right? Like they said, hey, you know what? We mined these blocks, and they were, I think at the time, like 50 Bitcoins each. But, you know, we're willing to give it up for the betterment of the network. And they downgraded, they went on the other chain, and they continued. And that was actually pretty beautiful, right? Like that's the sort of the spirit that I hope we can get back to is where you can have stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, at the current stage, there's so much animosity that what you're going to end up having is some sort of, you know, hard fork that ends up in a permanent fork, not just one that can be no longer one that can be reorganized back to the same chain as everybody else. And that's very likely, just because, you know, there are enough people that want to bet, right? Like there's Roger Ver's now talking to somebody, negotiating to, you know, potentially trade a bunch of his coins for Bitcoin Unlimited coins should a fork happen and stuff like that. He thinks it's a great investment.
That reminds me of a really great story. One time, there were these, I was going to call them Indians, but let's call them Native Americans. There was these Native Americans, and they were on this great island named Manhattan. And these white people rolled in with some beads, and they said, we would like to buy your island. It was not a good deal. Don't sell your island for a bunch of beads. Bad deal. They also got some blankets with smallpox and what have you. Terrible deal. Terrible deal. And yeah, Roger, also, I've got some magic beans. I could get some magic beans for you too.
I mean, who knows, right? Like if he believes in his chain, and that's sort of the market speaking, I think he should just go on Bitstamp and dump his coins using the splitting feature that they have for that particular fork. But I mean, it can be, yeah. I mean, I think the volume is very thin there, so maybe that's not a great idea. But yeah, this sort of thing is it can be very, very tricky because exchanges will want to price these things, and I think for most people that
that haven't sold before the hard fork, what's going to happen is they're going to want to sort of see what happens first with the price before they sell or buy or whatever. And you can't do that until there's a permanent fork. And at that point, there's two coins forever. You can't the horses are out of the barn, right? Like you can't bring them back. So
you can't unscrew a light bulb. And I always like to remind people, I hate to get political with this. I watch a lot of MSNBC. I'm pretty liberal. But there was a congressman talking about our current situation. And what he said is that we need the Republicans and we need both sides in this issue to think about what their grandchildren would say. What would your grandchildren say? What did you do when Bitcoin was about to fork? And they're going to be looking at this with the two chains, with the endless confusion. And we need people to step up with that vision, that greater good of Bitcoin that you talked about with the previous hard fork. We need that. How do we get them to have that?
Yeah, and that's a really good way to sort of look at it, because I think digital currencies are here to stay, right? Like it might be that Bitcoin forks and then a lot of people get out and then it sort of fails and then something else comes along and then it wins. But I mean, do you want to go down in history as like the Apple Newton, or do you want to go down in history as the iPhone, right? Like, because like one came a little bit before its time and there were some very bad product choices made out of it, made because of it. It's entirely possible that we end up the Apple Newton of the industry, and like it takes like another 30 years or something before something comparable comes out that beats it. And it will eventually. The banking system's old. It's horribly inefficient. Not to mention, like, based on some really bad economic theories in many ways. But yeah, like this is something that can, like, how do you want to go down in history, right? Like, oh, we couldn't agree on this on the tiles on the floor, so we divorced. Come on, give me a break. Come on, we're better than this. We're better than this. Seriously, we are.
Well, and I'm going to betray my age again, but I used an Apple Newton and I used a Palm Pilot, and I want to be the iPhone. I want to be the thing without the stylus. I want to use my finger. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, me too. And I think everybody wants to. You want to be at the forefront of a revolution or at the beginning of like a failed one, right? Like. You want to be in the revolution that wins. You don't want to be collateral damage. And the thing is, there's like monetary incentive on top of all this too. It's like, it's crazy because we win. We are all going to be very rich people. We are going to be part of the elite of the world, right? Like that's how much money we're talking about. And yet, because of the tiles on the floor, we're going to ruin everything. Yes.
And remember, we talked to Vinny yesterday, and Vinny's been incredible at predicting the price. I'm awful at it. I have no idea. I always think up. But what Vinny was saying before this hard fork thing is 3,000, 5,000. The sky's the limit. We're going to fix scaling. Everyone's going to use Bitcoin. It's going to be great. If we hard fork, that's not what's going to happen. Like, you guys have freaked out Vinny. Like, I don't want to freak you out, but like the guy who was predicting things, he's freaked out now. Like, he wants unification. Yeah. He's still on board. He's a reasonable guy, but he is freaked out about what we are doing with this Bitcoin. And we've got to slow down.
Yeah.
And stop this thing.
Yeah, and that's I think right. I mean, like I said, like it's entirely possible you end up with two authoritarian coins, and I have no interest in being part of an authoritarian currency. We already have that in the dollar, and that's not what I want to be a part of. And if it ends up that way, then it's sort of like a republic that starts with great ideals that like degrades into a dictatorship later, right? Like, and there are so many examples of that throughout history where you start with just amazing ideals and then you end up with something much, much worse. So
I forget who said it, but there's something like democracy is the most likely path to a dictatorship.
Yeah, I mean that may be true, and we may end up with that in Bitcoin, and that's actually really, really sad. I would hate to see that, and I think there are enough people in this industry And even like diametric opposites, like people on both sides that I think would sell, right? Like that they would get out of Bitcoin altogether if it got to the point where it was that bad.
And it's not just a monetary thing, it's an emotional thing. It's going to hurt my feelings. I'm going to have to change the name of MadBitcoins to Mad Ethereum or Mad Dash Coins or something. We don't want that. I don't want to go to a new project. I'm not like some other people where they just pay you and you put on a different hat. I like the hat I have. So let's not do this, people.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it would be so awful. And there's so many like so many ways in which this is going to damage us that we haven't even thought about, right? Like there's so many ways in which like people will just get out of the system. There will be people that are going to think that Bitcoin isn't really what I thought it was and stuff like that, turning off like an entire generation to this stuff. And
how are you going to tell your mom? Isn't it hard enough to tell your mom about Bitcoin and how to use it? How are you going to tell her there's two of them? How are you going to tell your mom to handle this split? Can we please anything? Think about
and you're going to have to explain it to them, right?
Yeah. We were fighting over the size of the block. We got divorced. It's awful.
Hey, can you wait a second? I'm going to go to a better camera. Give me 1 second.
All right. I'll just keep making fun of Windows because I'm sure it was Windows that recruited. Uh-oh. They're going to complain. There's a lot of Alexia. Try to mute that one. All right.
All right. So let me disconnect.
Echo.
Okay. Yeah, that's better. All right.
All right. But it was Windows that rebooted you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Oh, God. Yeah. So bad. It's like Windows 10. I told it like before, don't bother me about it, and it still did it.
I've always complained about that, but then the Mac is just as bad now. There was a beautiful time where Steve Jobs was alive, and they were like, never interrupt the user. No matter what you do, the user's flow is the most important thing. Now it's like, can I interrupt your flow later tonight, later tomorrow, the next day? And I'm like, how about never? How about never?
Yeah.
You have to install the updates, the security situation, blah blah blah.
And it can be pretty terrible. I hate that, but that's sort of the choices we're given. I would be on Linux, but there's some photo software I use. So what can I do?
I had trouble with my drivers on Linux. I prefer just to use the computer. I want to edit videos and do things. I could read about drivers and stuff, but I don't want to.
Well, these days Ubuntu is pretty good about it. If it wasn't for certain pieces of software, I would probably be on Linux entirely. Yeah.
They all say now they're saying that Jimmy is the new Bitcoin Jesus because he has a halo.
Yeah, that's my life. Yeah.
They also want Jimmy, MadBitcoin, and Vinny to go talk at these scaling conferences. That'd be cool if I was invited.
Yeah, consensus. They've been talking about that for a while. That should be an interesting one. I think Adam Beck just announced he's not going to go, but we'll see what happens with that. I mean, I don't know if that's the way you get past it. I think you just need to sort of drain hope from everybody. And this kind of a sad way to say it, but sometimes you just get tired of getting angry, right? And I think that point will come, I think, around November when the Segwit activation window expires and Bitcoin United hasn't reached like the activation threshold, which I think needs to be around 75%. I don't think it'll get there. So if that happens and sort of both sides lose hope and they're like, okay, well, we could put all this energy, like, we've been having this debate for 2 years now, right? Like, and they're like, oh, do we really want to do this for another 3 years?
We thought we had it settled. They brought back Segwit. It was the technical solution. Even if you didn't understand it, you were just like, well, it's the solution. And then I guess somebody disagreed.
Yeah, I mean, there can be sort of like different ways to do it. There's a hard fork way of solving malleability and kind of get Segwit. It's not very popular, but there's something called flexible transactions that had a lot of promise. I think it's implemented on Bitcoin Classic or something like that. There are ways to do it that would be a little cleaner. And I do make this argument in one of my articles that, as much as, we think there are people on Core that dump on like Bitcoin Unlimited people or those that are oppose Segwit. They do have something of a point in the sense that Segwit is a little bit on the complicated side, right? Like there's a lot of sort of code that hasn't been proven yet. That's come on, and in a way, like having this debate and having that not activated is kind of a signal from the market saying, you know what, you don't need to make this improvement, right? You don't necessarily, like, there are plenty of people complaining about scaling Bitcoin, and yet the price has gone up, right? Like, well, what's the market saying? And like, what are the miners saying? There's a few loud people on Twitter or whatever, but the vast majority of people that own Bitcoin, I think, just hold it, right? Like in a cold wallet, they don't transact every day, so they don't even know what's going on.
In a cold wallet that they tell you how difficult it is to get into. Oh, I'd have to do this and that. I'm never going to get into that thing.
Yeah. And if I die, there's like 7 people that would have to be cooperating. Yeah. It gets, and that's the way it should be, because I think it's store of value. It's its killer feature. It's the thing that it does better than any other asset on Earth. Is that you don't have, unlike gold, it doesn't weigh anything, right? You don't have to, if you want to carry $500,000 in gold, you have to carry this big, 400-ounce bar or something around, where you might get, somebody might just take it from you. It's you can store it, you can back it up. There are so many amazing things about the store of value properties of Bitcoin, and that's why most people have it. But if you destroy store of value by destroying trust in the network, by splitting Bitcoin into 2, 3, 5, 7 Bitcoins, this can be a terrible thing. And that destroys confidence from the market. People like me will sell. People like Vinny have already sold. There are people that, if this happens, they'll be getting it out en masse. Like you think it's dropped a lot in the last 2 weeks or something. Oh, you watch. Like, if there's a hard fork, I think maybe 10. I don't know. I can't predict on a short-term basis, but I think long-term it's a terrible thing.
All right, Jimmy. So I think we've had a great conversation today, and I think we have a new homework assignment for our Bitcoin United followers. And this is going to be a really hard thing to do, and I don't like having to say it, but Jimmy was right here. We have to drain the hope. What I want you to do is I want you to go into every conversation where someone's bragging about how good it's going to be when we fork. And I want you to explain to them that if we fork, we both lose. I lose, you lose, the price drops, we all lose. The confusion, the user interface issues, telling your mother, if we fork, we all lose. We have to drain the hope. That's your new assignment. Jimmy, do you have anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, thanks for having me on, first of all. I really hope that that as a community we can come back together, right? Like to what made us fall in love with in the first place, and that's store of value, right? Like, there were some medium of exchange things, right? Like, it's a very sexy thing to talk about. Hey, look, I just sent $20 to somebody in China. See how awesome that is? You don't talk about, oh, you know what, I could back it up and put it in my safe and not think about it for the next 20 years. Like, that's not what
That's not going to impress the chicks. Come on.
No, but the boring things, honestly, are the foundations of a marriage or whatever. And that's the analogy that I want to get back to. Like, do the boring thing, right? Like, it's okay if it's boring. We can build on top of it and do all sorts of exciting things on top of Bitcoin. There's so many great ideas out there that aren't getting implemented because we're caught up in this war. There's all this uncertainty. There are people that aren't investing now because, is this going to, I got to tell you, in the last week or so, I've gotten more inquiries about Bitcoin because people are spooked, right? Like, people, my friends know me as the Bitcoin guy or whatever, and they're like, if I had to get rid of my Bitcoins, how would I do it, right? Like, and I'm reading about this hard fork stuff, and I don't know what's going on. I don't understand it. Can you explain it to me? Oh, well, then should I get rid of my Bitcoin? And that's after I explain it to them. This is like, even talking about it is causing panic among long-term holders, right? And that's really bad. That's really bad. Like, when you're spooking those people that have put it in a safe for the last 2 years and haven't thought about it, and now are like, oh, should I sell now? Like, you done wrong, right? Like,
and it was hard too. There was a point there where I lost most of my value. I couldn't even think of it. I can't even imagine losing that much money. So, and I don't have that much. I'm not rich or nothing, but
yeah. I mean, it can be very. It's if you're losing those people, you're losing. You're not going to gain anybody new, and that's something that Vinny mentioned yesterday too. You need a lot of money coming in for the price to stay as it is, and thankfully there's a lot of interest, and people do believe it's a great sort of value. But you lose that trust. There's a lot of holders that are going to become bag holders, right? Like it becomes almost a burden at some point, and it becomes a bad investment very quickly. That said, I don't think it's going to get there. I do have a lot of hope in the fact that the whole system is set up for consensus, and that's one of the brilliant things that Satoshi Nakamoto did, which is he made it so that it's very, very difficult to sort of split the network, or to do anything where almost everybody didn't agree, right? Like you need a very large portion of the community to agree. And even stuff like the 10-minute block time, right? Like and people, every altcoin since has like shortened that time. But I actually think that's a good thing, because it makes it harder to fork off, because it becomes even longer, right? It's sufficiently long enough that from a game theory perspective, it becomes less attractive to go fork off. And that's a great thing. And I believe in the system. I believe that it's based on consensus. I don't think either party is going to get to 75% without getting to 95% on some agreement. So we have a small window where there could be a disagreement, and there could be two coins, somewhere between 75 and 95% of the community on one side of the issue, and the rest on the other side. That would cause some sort of a serious fork. I don't think anybody would do it just from a game theory sort of perspective. Like around 51%, there's no way anything's going to work, right? Like you're probably going to end up losing your shirt if you tried to go that way. But that like anywhere between 75 and 95, that's sort of our danger zone. I don't think we're there yet with either one. Activations at around 40% for Bitcoin Unlimited, around 30% for Segwit. So I'm hoping those percentages hold, and the wise 30% that aren't signaling anything, that they will continue to not signal anything.
And meanwhile, I think we're all going to have to get our Barry White voices out. We're going to have to say, hey, baby, I know things are hard, but I want to get back together. Let's stay together. Let's remember the time and why we fell in love in the first place.
Yeah,
where that love goes, baby.
Yeah, and
that's what we need.
This is not an irreconcilable situation. A lot of people make it out to be, but it's not that bad, guys. Like a vast majority of people in Bitcoin don't care about this stuff, right? Like it's the people that are like sort of screaming about it that make it seem like it's big. But in actual fact, most of the people, I got a tweet the other day, like from a guy that I know has a lot of Bitcoin, and he's been holding for a long time. He said, just ride this out. This too shall pass, right? Like it's not going to be something that's going to linger or whatever. There's an end date for Segwit activation. At some point, Bitcoin Unlimited is going to stop increasing in hash rate, and it's going to be clear you're not going to get enough miners on board to be able to do it. And at that point, all hope for this change is drained. They either get to a table and agree, or more likely we'll just move on past it, pretend it never happened, kind of like that incident, on vacation or something. It's never.
I didn't even look at that girl. I didn't even look at that girl. Come on.
Yeah, it's past now. We're not going to talk about it. Let's move on. Let's keep working, and let's make beautiful stuff. We're good. We're all superheroes. We're all going to change the world with this technology if we do it together. And that's the message I hope that your audience and the rest of the Bitcoin community can take.
All right. Thanks so much, Jimmy, for being on the show. You can follow Jimmy on Twitter at @JimmySong, and he's got a lot of great Medium articles. Most of them are linked in the description below, so be sure to check those out. And until next time, the message is, let's stay together and unify Bitcoin. Let's all start signaling for unification. Until next time, bye-bye.